Namaste and a warm welcome to all of our viewers who are tuned to our show today. As we in DCNepal team embark on this new venture, we have asked ourselves that besides the global pandemic, what is a major issue that afflicts Nepal at the moment? We have come to a conclusion that the strained relations with our closest neighbor, India, is one of the major challenges that we face. And something of this magnitude requires a solution that is relevant for the stability and prosperity of Nepal. In this realm, we could think of no one better than Dr. Bhek Bahadur Thapa, who has left an illustrious career for others to study. He has been a former foreign minister, a finance minister. He has served in the diplomatic missions that have gone to the United States of America and India. He still remains as Nepal's leading figure when it comes to bilateral ties with India, because of his long experience and the fact that he recently led the Nepalese team in the Eminent Persons Group, which was established to review the bilateral ties and recommend a new way forward, stands as a testament to his towering prominence in this realm. So we at DCNepal would like to formally welcome you to this platform, and it is a genuine pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Shweta, and my thanks to all the participants.
Yes.
Thank you for a very, very kind introductions.
Thank you so much, sir. So in today's interview, I would like to start this discussion by expounding on a concept that has gained dominance in the academic and policy discussions. Ever since Nepal's founder, the late King Prithvinarayan Shah, delivered his maxims in the Divya Upadesh to pass down to his successors, Nepal's geopolitical vulnerability has been described as a yam between two boulders, which has translated in the current times to mean Nepal is a small state. And it is a very prevalent view in the current Nepali psyche. Do you believe, sir, that this small state viewpoint is still relevant in the current context and that it should be a guide to the foreign policy as we move forward?
Well, when you begin to look at Nepal's foreign policy from the very beginning until now, the thread of continuity, initially the Prithvinarayan Shah's phase was the expansionary phase. That is the time when the imperial powers were grabbing bits and parts of different parts of the world and becoming imperial masters. Around the same time, Prithvinarayan Shah left Gorkha, and his expedition ended up, Nepal more or less coming to a size, near where we are today. So that was the phase of expansion. After that, survival phase, basically by hiding ourselves from and pleasing the imperial masters. We wanted them to leave us alone and give us a sovereign status for which we have struggled from beginning until now. Then the third phase is democratic phase, when Nepal became part of the global endeavor and active participant and even effective partner in a global affairs, despite its size, despite many other handicaps. I think we appear on the global scenario as a nation state with interest and capability to be a part. So that, when Prithvinarayan Shah, who must have been a very deep thinker, coined the phrase, yam between two stones, something totally indigenous that, those of us who grew up in childhood in a farm community have even witnessed yam being, shot, being brought out of the wall. So in a sense, it struck a very native chord and appealed to and that became a kind of a catchy phrase, which even today now, we are not only repeating, we are trying to remind ourselves of the soft power versus hard power and survival of even the soft power. First of all, let me say that I appreciate what Chiran and many of you have done to initiate a dialogue on foreign policy between not only interested but also knowledgeable, members of the society. In my capacity, in dealing with Nepal's foreign policy with the rest of the world, off and on, one thing I find and that is missing is the wide discourse between the intellectuals in the society to cross-examine, to examine, to cross-examine, and provide support to the power structure to follow the right course, behind which the intelligentsia has done part of its homework as a citizen, as intellectuals, and in a sense, sort of, in Nepali we call it khariyebu, is, that discourse adds to the wealth of thinking, and puts either pressure or support to the governing structure, no matter who it is. So in a sense, anything we do on foreign policy has a national consensus behind it. That adds not only to the value, but provides outsiders who deal with us also a base that is national in character and nature. To answer your question, yes, the terminology of using yam between two stones has a relevance because we have two neighbors, giant neighbors, very large in size compared to us. But at the same time, it be squeezed between the two in a way that the yam usually finds itself and looks for a nook and corner to expand. So I think that's why you look at Dibyopidis. The relevance of that thought, even now, comes to our mind as a reminder of the kind of challenge and the course we need to follow as a lesson. So, it may not be very modern in terms of concept, but the idea, the thoughts he injected, about the economic aspect of sovereignty, the Swavalambi, not to allow, Mahajans inside the country, learn the trade. What even the world leaders even today are saying almost the same thing. Whether it's Trump or trying to make the country great. I think Ridwanand Shah was not only architect of the nation, but also he foresaw difficulties coming along the way and warned the future generation of the realization of the reality of these challenges and how to deal with it.
It's a visionary appeal that still applies today. So with relative to that is my other question. So in addition to your numerous diplomatic portfolios, you recently led the Nepali side in the EPG discussions that we had with India. We have very close historical ties with our southern neighbor, but what we've seen recently is that the ties have soured and our relations have deteriorated like never before. In the aftermath of the recent territorial dispute, there has come a stalemate in the bilateral discussions. What are Nepal's options to deal with a great neighbor like India? What can we do to enhance our bilateral ties? So what have we done and what should we do further?
Well, it's our relation with India, close, unlike with any other country. But at the same time, has been fulfilled with challenges and difficulties off and on. You talked about EPG. eminent persons group, which I headed from Nepali side. But the new phase of Nepal's foreign policy started after democratization. From narrow base, it became broad based. It became global. Our search, our desire to be part of the world, found expression, including in the governing structure. So the new power structure that came into being, it also coincided with not only with Nepal's seeking, venturing to move out and be recognized and be a part of the global effort. It also coincided with the end of World War, Second World War, and the quest for global peace, because so that the tragedy of World War would not be repeated. So the intellectuals of that period, from America to Europe to other parts of the world, including South Asia, and that included Nepal also, in search for peace and stability and human values, preserve human values. Not only the establishment of the UN and other agencies, but the initiation taken by the Third World to launch the non-aligned movement. Because we didn't want to be part of either, be an integral part of either, and be guided by borrowed wisdom or the course of action or the line of action decided by other. So in a sense, just at that time, we capitalized on the opportunity to be a part of larger exercise in non-aligned movement, where we made a mark, we adopted values, shared values, and we also, through the United Nations and other agencies, expanded the horizon of our linkage with the rest of the world, including in the institutional framework developed around that time. So from hiding in a corner, preserving its sovereign status, but with a limited authority and role, we jump-started and moved into a global era. And the role played by the then leaders of Nepal, from King Mahendra to intellectuals like Yadunnath Khanal to many others, in a sense, carved out an area for Nepal, not just to make our voice heard, but also created a framework of call it, the framework of thoughts that identified us as a lover of peace and desirous of development and be an effective partnership, be a partner in a global affairs. So in a sense, that was the framework created, capitalized by the then generation of people, and we owe a debt of gratitude to them. But then, in a sense, I think that was, that 2 decades was the history of emancipation and expansion of, not of territory, but of thought and participation. Now coming to India, your question was more directed to India. After the imperial period, the only legacy of Nepal's independent sovereign status was the Anglo-Nepal War and the treaty signed with the British at that time, defining Nepal's territory as well as existence as a sovereign nation. The documentation at that time needed polishing and sort of, improving, but that was the basis in terms of international recognition of Nepal by not only East India Company, then we started, our linkage with America and many other countries, limited in the beginning, expanded after 1960. So looking at Nepal from outside, in a sense, moving beyond the isolation space to the phase of active participation. I think we have to face many hurdles, ups and downs, because the conventional thinking is somehow or other we are landlocked, and because of that, there was limited opportunity for Nepal, limited of the Nepal to conduct itself by itself. That conventional sort of thinking that a big brother is there, and therefore, you are not under the shadows, but under the psychological thought process. We needed to emancipate ourselves from that. That is when that generation of Nepalis played a major role, not only by joining the international institutions, not only by expanding relation with the rest of the world, but even in the neighborhood, maintaining a balance and maintaining balanced thinking, and not being by adopting non-alignment as a core principle of our foreign policy. In a sense, conducting our affair by ourselves, but as a part of a global scenario. That in India, when I was ambassador, I had heard some of the Indian diplomats in the gathering talk about we have lost Nepal. And at that time, my retort was, when did you ever have it? In a sense, these two sentences explains the tug of war, psychological tug of war. Thinking on the part of India that is a small brother, they should abide by, our thinking. And Nepal is saying that, our sovereign status, regardless of size, regardless of wealth or other factors, we stand on our own. We'll do our bit. Our independence cannot be, a gift of somebody else. It is our birthright. So the Nepalese, the foreign policy conduct, in a sense, we sort of, the treaties, different kind of treaties apart. It was continuous struggle to prove to the rest of the world that we are part of global structure, no less and no more than any other nation state is. With India now, I think you asked the question. And you feel earlier during British time, our runners tried to beat the British, and move them to recognize us and leave us alone. But that added to isolation, but also to sovereign existence in law, in letter, and in practice. But we're poor, we're small, we're landlocked. There are many other handicaps with which we have to deal with. And democratization, I think, ushered us into a new era. And the result of which now is ever increasing assertion by Nepal at home, in the neighborhood, and beyond. And Nepal today is a proud member of the community of nations on a global scale, no more, no less than any other country in the world, regardless of size, wealth, and other means.
So you talked about the idea of mutual interdependence and of the conservative thinking of India as the big brother. There's a new narrative, sir, that is emerging that says that while we are dependent on India for some things, we also contribute a lot to our southern neighbor in terms of remittance, in terms of security. Thousands of our men serve in the Indian armed forces. So in presenting this narrative, so in highlighting this newfound thought, do you think that India might change its stance on Nepal, its big brother stance, so to say, when it deals with its neighborhood?
Well, first of all, I think you have to recognize that there have been changes. It may be more gradual than we want, but there have been changes from 1950 treaty to the presence of Indian forces in Kathmandu as military advisors group, to check posts along our frontiers in the northern area. Not only that, but also sort of the trade treaty and other agreements done with India for after 1951, I think have been consistent or in keeping with the norms and values between nations anywhere else in the world. So in a sense, changes happen, but not as rapidly as Nepalese have wanted. This in a sense is where the relation between the two countries has been up and down on different occasions. What Nepal has gained is before us, both in terms of active participation on an equal footing basis with the rest of the world. Having achieved that, the poverty and other, and physical handicap and other things are there to be faced. And even on that, we have made progress, but may not be as rapid as we have wanted. But just think of it, from the time, from 1960 onwards, there have been 3 blockades by India and Nepal. Some on political ground, some without explaining, but the obvious areas of difference in thinking between us. But in a sense, I think we have moved along in the right direction with gaps in between, occasional gaps in between. But the point you made is very relevant, and I think this is what we keep reminding India, is we are also contributors to India's security, to India's economic progress, be it in water resources, be it through the availability of human resource, to joint ventures and trade, and come, then as a part of EPG exercise, we found out that the Pew report highlights that repatriation from Nepal by Indian citizens is higher than what Nepalese citizens sent to Nepal from India. So I think that point was hinted by you. Most of us assume that the trade balance, because of trade balance, that it's the other way around. From that to what Nepal has done, to India, I think it has been a mutually beneficial, mutually interdependent scenario, rather than one-way dependency or big size dictating the nature of cooperation between two countries.
Yes, sir. So, looking at the massive geopolitical shifts that we are witnessing today, we see 2 major issues pop up right now. One is the clash between India and China at the LAC, and the other is the US-China trade of words that's been happening right now. So we're already a part of the BRI. We're trying to amend and ratify the MCC. Within this scenario of great power rivalries, so how does Nepal, adhering to its policy of non-alignment, how do we find use of these lucrative offers?
Well, I think in some ways, I think our position is already open. We have already been part of BRI. Our Prime Minister has at least assured, and our ministers have already signed their, with the American AMMC document. But basically, I think what you have to look at is whether any of these activities impacts on our neutrality and, equal treatment of our neighbors in sovereign terms, the size apart.
Yes.
From that point of view, I think physical handicap and difficulties have hindered our trade relation with China. It has, it's not as rapid as we would have liked to make. So with the open border with India, the access to market both for people as well as goods and services is easier. Those are physical handicaps we are doing our best to overcome. But, progress is slow. Now, I think let's not look at Nepal's relation and relate it only to major countries. I think Nepal's position is unique in the sense that we are part of the five principles of peaceful coexistence that came out during Bandung, and that has been adhered to by an online group for a long period of time, with little up and down on issues. Basically, I think that continues to be our guideline. We are not dealing with one of our neighbor against the other. That short-sighted approach Nepal never adopted. I think we have been broad-minded in terms of treating our both neighbors in equal sovereign terms. But the trade and other physical factors are easier on one side and challenging on the other side. So from that point of view, you cannot compare in quantitative terms what is happening between the two countries. But as friends, China's relation with Nepal has been problem-free. We have no border issues, no other issues. With India, we have outstanding issues. Some have been solved, some have been modified and improved. But basically, I think our challenge in terms of arriving at a plateau where the conventional thinking among the people that there is an element of high-handedness, yes, both in thinking and in conduct. That has to be erased from the mind of the people at both ends. And for that, I think Nepal has been struggling for the last 60 years. In fact, the origin of EPG, Eminent Persons Group, to look at the broad aspect of Nepal-India relation and to define it to attain a new height in relation on all related issues, was conceived by Prime Minister Oli and India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi ji. We in the process of conducting that exercise with Koshiyari ji as the leader on the Indian side and me on the Nepalese side, we discovered that many of the, like the payment situation and other aspects you referred earlier, that the reality is moving at one level. People are not as well briefed to know what is being achieved and what is not being achieved. In some ways, I think we're also fighting a psychological war. That small country syndrome in Nepal and big brother concept in India, somehow or other have continued, and effort to get away from it is possible only when we all unequal arrangements have been dealt with or have been addressed.
Yes, sir.
And I think that looks like a long-term exercise, 6 decades. say after Nepal became free of I call it Rana Mukta Nepal, Samrajya Mukta Bharat. I think that has been now 6 decades. It's too long to wait for things to change, but nonetheless, periodic exercise have been carried out. This is where I think initiative like what you, Charan, and you all have done, of drawing the intellectual community within the realm of this exercise, to make them fully aware of reality. One area where our government consistently, I'm not only talking about this government, but all governments in Nepal have failed, is to take intellectual community and civil society into confidence, to brief them properly of what is happening, to take them into confidence, so that they become part of the effort. Now, when I was in India, the number of institutions manned by free-thinking intellectuals, in the Institute of Policy Research to, Observer Research Foundation, to number of other, these have been sort of initiated by the government and left for intellectuals to man it and run it with adequate provision of resources and freedom of thinking and writing. I think we are lacking on that, and this was, so I'm pleased there are efforts like yours, that is making an attempt to draw people on the sideline also into the mainstream, thinking-wise. But I think the challenge to them, is coming to Nepal's foreign policy. In a way, at the global level, we are effective participant. We won twice Security Council seat. At the United Nations. World Bank and other institutions are actively, engaging in helping us, and we are also contributing to global effort towards peace, prosperity, even though consistent with our size, but more in terms of conceptual and psychological rather than the physical thing, because this is where we're somewhat handicapped.
So regarding your idea of us being a community of nations and having an equal footing with the rest of the world, I believe that a major part of that is because of our diplomatic relationships that we have with other countries. Our channels of diplomacy serve a very significant role in that. But so recently, many have spoken about how the diplomatic corps of Nepal has degenerated and decayed in the last several years. To make matters worse, allegations of ambassadorial positions being on sale for those who are willing to pay the price have come to the fore. What is your viewpoint, sir? What is your opinion regarding the future of Nepal's diplomatic corps, sir? What is missing and what should be done better, sir, to bolster our diplomatic missions?
Well, I think, so you hit the nail right on the head in terms of our diplomatic exercise being less than effective in recent years. In some ways, I think we're still learning, but as part of my dialogue with the international donors, I was talking to German ambassador at that time in Nepal, and he told me in Germany for the last more than 80 years, there has been only one political appointee as ambassador. Likewise, I think, whether we look at other countries represented in Nepal, the ratio of political appointees is virtually non-existent, except countries run by army and countries in transition, political transition. Somehow or other, I think that anybody can be a diplomat, or anybody can be appointed a diplomat, or anyone who can afford it can be a spokesperson for the nation, has crept into our mindset within the major political parties. So in a sense, they are looking at it as a reward rather than as a challenge. So this is an area I think that needs awakening up. I happen to be in one of the Asian countries and was invited by the ambassador. And in a drawing room, I saw a photograph of one political leader, not the head of the government, not the head of the state. So I made a point. I said, how come as an embassy, which is official residence of Nepal, and the ambassador said, I was sent by that mindset. I don't know how he or she got in there. But this is an area where professionalism has somehow or other disappeared. And our missions could be, I'm not against political appointees. If some people, I myself was ambassador for 14 years, and I was a political appointee because I was not a part of the foreign service, career foreign service. Therefore, I have no right to abuse of others who have been appointed under similar circumstances. But that apart, I think selectively appointing somebody with a special quality of being proximity near the regime or mindset or the values, comparable mindset and values is one thing, but that has to be an exception, not a rule. Here I think it is Amrita Bhagmanda was in Nepal. I think in a sense, what applies to our political process also applies to our diplomatic appointees. And that needs to be somehow or other behind the scene and eliminated.
Yes. So with this poignant thought, we'd like to end this interview. Thank you so much for taking out your valuable time. So your thoughts, your concepts are incredibly invaluable, sir. How you view the diplomatic missions and your idea of bigger and small powers provides a greater context not only for the policymakers but for the academics as well. And so we thank you for that.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.